Matt, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, congratulations, Andy. This is wonderful. I'm very happy for you.
Well, I really appreciate that, man. Thank you. This was a long time coming, and I'm really happy to get this opportunity. All right. So I introduced Matt a little bit earlier, but for those of you who missed it, Matt is the managing editor of USC Trojans Wire through the USA Today Sports Media Group. He has been covering college football for a long time. I'll let him tell you exactly how long, but I know he's been big into the Pac-12 and obviously covering that team this year. And yeah, it's been a pretty interesting start for the Pac-12. We got 8 of the 12 teams that suited up so far. But Matt, just welcome. Thanks again.
Yeah, it's a real treat. And, so I cover USC primarily right now. That's my job. And it's one of those games where it's a win and you'd rather win than lose. But like everything else other than the win was very discouraging in terms of USC's big picture. So that's just one of those realities.
Yeah, why don't we start there? I kind of wanted to rehash the USC game because it was, as somebody who's watched pretty much every Seahawks game for the last 3 years, I think I kind of got a handle on games going like this. I didn't start my game. I didn't title my game recap until the very last minute, just in case. And that's kind of what we got here. It was one of those games where for so long, USC fans have been waiting for this season. They saw how good Keaton Slovis was last year. And I think so many people were ready for the struggles that Coach Clay Helton and the staff has had in the past few years to be over, and then to see them all just flooded back in the first game. Sure, they pulled out the win on a literal miracle, a ball that bounced off 2 guys' hands before Brew McCoy managed to haul it in for what was not quite the game-winning score, but pretty close. And what's the state of affairs for USC fans right now? Like, it's got to be. That's probably their toughest game, but it's got to be pretty tough to have kind of had to endure that for the first game of the year.
Very tough. And, the thing is, the difference between the colleges and the pros is that if you're the Seahawks, and I'm a Seahawk fan too, by the way, is that if you lose 4 times in an NFL season, that's pretty good. 12-4 gets you probably a first-round bye. You're checking the boxes if you lose 4 times in an NFL season. You don't have that same leverage or leeway in college football. Even just one slip up is pretty substantial. So, the margins are smaller in the college game, and USC needed to show something. And this was a 9 a.m. game, 9 a.m. in Los Angeles, pandemic off season. There was an awareness that this game was going to be weird and wacky on several levels. But so the real problem for USC is the offense didn't work. The offense was a real problem. The offensive line got dominated, especially in the second half. So, they recovered an onside kick, and that's a very Seahawks thing, going back to the NFC Championship game against the Packers. If only this game had higher stakes, if it was like a Pac-12 championship game, that's the kind of game where if you get over the hump there, then you've really accomplished something. You're in a New Year's Six bowl. The USC still has a lot of work to do. So anyway, the offense didn't work. Offensive line is a huge problem. The Trojans clearly weren't the more physical team. Arizona State was. And so Tyler Vaughn's fumbling and showing very casual ball security. Keaton Slovis not zipping his passes. They really didn't penetrate through the air. They floated. They wobbled at times. And Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't catch some of the 50-50 balls that we saw Michael Pittman come down with on a regular basis last season. Just the players you would have expected to be really sharp in this situation were not sharp. So that is discouraging. There is kind of the optimistic way to spin that, and that is that, well, hey, if USC's best offensive players can get their act together, this could be really special. True, but the offensive line might not enable all the machinery of the offense to make it happen. So I think offensive line is where the foremost concerns lie. The defense was actually pretty solid. Couldn't have asked too much more from Todd Orlando's unit in a game 1 situation. Jaden Daniels of Arizona State, one of the Pac-12 preseason player of the year favorites, didn't even throw for 160 yards. That's an outstanding effort by USC's pass defense. But the fact that the offense was in position to not back up the defense, until the recovering an onside kick. That's alarming. The offense really should have been much further ahead of the curve in a week one situation, especially given that in the pandemic, Andy, as you know well, the offenses have generally been ahead of the defenses.
Yeah.
The fact that this USC offense did not stamp itself and assert its supremacy, that's really discouraging.
That's what was so surprising to me is we've seen so many defenses come out and look like struggle quite a bit because the pandemic seems to be favoring these offenses. And you have a team that lost their best defensive player in Jay Tufele, who declared for or opted out to go to the NBA or the NFL, excuse me. And then you had, they lost Christian Rector to graduation. They lost John Houston to graduation. And you're looking at a team that with a new defensive coordinator, I thought for sure against probably the best quarterback they're going to play potentially the entire season in Jaden Daniels, I thought that defense was going to probably get diced, and they didn't. They held themselves pretty well. So for that to happen, and then for the offense to kind of fall flat against an Arizona State defense that I think is good, but I don't think was as good as what we saw. Like you said, Tyler Vaughn's with a very lazy fumble, Keenan Slovis not looking as sharp as he did last year, and the offensive line getting gashed was clearly the issue here. And I would like to think that there's some reason for optimism. Certainly Vaughn's and Slovis will probably turn things around. But, is the offensive line going to get better? They have an injury at the center position with Brett Nealon going down. I think he'll probably be okay, I think was the report that I saw, but it's a unit that they lost 2 starters from last year. They don't have a ton of experience. A lot of the guys up front have barely played at all. So it's something that I have a hard time seeing this team reach the pinnacle of where they can be if that offensive line doesn't improve.
Yes, and I think that offensive coordinator Graham Harrell, who didn't have a very good day, he needs to make some adjustments. And what we saw from USC's offense last year was Harrell trusted the receivers to get 50-50 balls in the air. Now, of course, that was mostly Michael Pittman, but Amon-Ra St. Brown was also part of that. Tyler Vaughn's was also part of that. They could go up and get balls at the catch point. Before Slovis came in, you had Matt Fink playing Utah after the injury to JT Daniels, plus Slovis. USC had to go to the third string on its quarterback depth chart. And so Graham Harrell just trusted the receivers to make plays. So we didn't quite see that to the same extent. I mean, and the Brew McCoy touchdown, the USC's third touchdown before the onside kick recovery, that was a deflection. That's kind of its own basket, not really an indicative of a good play call or, anything special that happened. That was just blind luck. So, the jump ball strategy from last year, I don't think you abandon it, but the adjustment I think Graham Harrell has to make is that straightforward power running on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, short yardage got stuffed. And so if you go up against a decent defensive line, are you just going to try to keep cramming the ball between the tackles, or are you going to run some jet sweeps? Are you going to do some action outside the tackles, outside the numbers, get to the boundary? There's a need to use different angles of attack with the running game, that it can't just be student body right. The thing about Graham Harrell, Andy, as you know, is that he broke the mold, that USC didn't hire air raid coordinators. It didn't hire triple option, anything outside the box of the traditional pro style offensive formation. So Graham Harrell is already breaking the mold, and he has to continue to break the mold. He can't really conform to conventional styles or expectation. He needs to continue to evolve this offense the way he thinks he needs to. He can't conform to expectations. USC is going to need to stretch the field horizontally, I think, with its running game before it can then return to the straight ahead power smash mouth style that USC fans know well. He's going to have to do some different things, open up angles, provide some different looks in order for this USC rushing game to complement the passing game the way we know it can.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but with USC, they got Arizona in week 2, a team that has not played a single game yet because they were one of the cancellations to start the year. A team that went 2-7 last year, was one of the worst teams in the conference. I think you can probably you never want to guarantee anything, but you can probably assume that there's going to be a win there. So for USC fans, outside of moving up to 2-0, what do you want to see from this team to make you feel a little bit more confident that maybe they're a team that can win the Pac-12 or beat Oregon in the championship? Like what are the things you touched on a few of them, but what are the things you want to see in this game in particular that'll make you maybe breathe a little bit easier for USC fans?
Yeah, there's only so much you can learn from a game against an Arizona team that's not expected to be especially strong. But I think so. You treat the game as not a reflection of what the opponent does. It's what we do, what we can control, what we can correct and fix. And certainly with the wide receivers, with Vaughns and Amon-Ra St. Brown not having their best games, that's fixable, and I think it will get fixed, as a matter of fact. So the big key is the offensive line. Offensive line needs to mash the Arizona front seven. Physical, dominant, tough, consistent. Give me that. Just have that building block to come out of the Arizona game, and it will be a good weekend for the Trojans. If they can assert themselves and really feel manly and feel, hey, we can just go into the stadium and kick butt, that would be a great way to then transition to the game next on the schedule, which is, really, I think, the key measure of this team before a possible Pac-12 title game, and that's going to Salt Lake City, a house of horrors, against Utah. So establish that physical identity would be the perfect thing to carry to Salt Lake City.